There's one thing everyone fears: the silence of the late night, when the world is asleep and all that remains is the sound of the wind and your own heartbeat. But for some people, that night wasn't just silence, it was the beginning of a real nightmare. These are true horror stories about people who were completely alone at night. Each story unfolds under the weight of darkness, when there's no one left to call for help. Brace yourself, because sometimes the scariest thing isn't a ghost, but the human standing just outside your door. Okay, so I used to work the lonely overnight night shift at a small hotel, and this happened about a year ago. But I still think about it almost every single sleepless night because it genuinely freaked me out so bad. And I don't know what the guy's plan was, or what he was trying to do. And it honestly makes me feel sick when I remember just how long he was there, and that I didn't even realize he wasn't supposed to be there. The hotel was small, only 3 floors and maybe 40 rooms total. It wasn't a busy place. Usually we only had about 10 or 15 rooms filled on weeknights. I worked from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. It was usually really boring and quiet, a peaceful but eerie stillness before the storm, which was fine with me. I would just sit behind the desk, do some paperwork, sometimes check the cameras, sometimes watch YouTube on my phone, while the clock ticked slowly through the endless night if it was really dead. The lobby wasn't big, just the desk and some couches off to the side with a TV and then some vending machines in the corner. Soft yellow lights reflected gently off the polished floor, creating a calm yet lonely atmosphere. Behind the desk was a little office where I had a computer and a chair and a glass window so I could see the lobby while I sat in there. The silence often felt heavier than the night itself, broken only by the hum of the vending machines. At night, the front doors locked automatically, so guests had to buzz in and I would press a button to let them through. Each buzz echoed like a warning in the empty halls. Usually nothing happened after midnight, except the occasional guest coming in late. But that quiet sense of safety shattered completely one night when this man came in around 11 o'clock, and everything about it still makes my stomach drop when I think about it. He buzzed the door, and I let him in. He looked to be in his mid-40s tall, kind of skinny but not too skinny. And he was wearing jeans and a baseball cap, moving slowly with a strange calmness, carrying a backpack. He walked up to the desk and asked if we had a room for the night. I told him yes, and gave him the price, and he nodded and pulled out a card. I swiped it, it went through, and I gave him a key card for room 214 on the 2nd floor. I remember he looked at me for a long, silent, unsettling few seconds before he left. He had this kind of emotionless, almost predatory blank expression, and his eyes stayed on me for maybe 3 or 4 seconds after I handed him the key. Then he turned and walked off toward the elevator. Nothing about it screamed dangerous right away, but it was enough to make me feel a sharp unease deep inside. After that, I sat back in the chair and played on my phone for a while. Around midnight, I looked up and he was back in the lobby. He didn't come to the desk. He just walked past me and sat down in the lounge area with the couches, his presence unsettling, the silence completely. The TV wasn't on, but he just sat down facing it. I figured maybe he couldn't sleep or something. Some guests hang out in the lobby sometimes, so I didn't think too much of it. But then, after about 30 long, tense minutes, I realized he was literally just sitting there doing nothing. He wasn't on his phone or reading. He wasn't even blinking or moving at all, just frozen in silence. He was just staring straight ahead at the blank screen. The silence in the room felt unbearably thick. I got up at one point to grab water from the vending machine, and when I walked across the lobby, I felt him turn his head and watch me the whole way. Every step echoed louder than it should have. I didn't look at him directly, but I could feel his eyes on me until I was back behind the desk. It gave me this really uneasy feeling. Something deep inside told me something was wrong. Around 1 o'clock a.m., I was checking the reservation system on the computer because I was bored. And that's when I noticed something weird. I pulled up the occupied room list and saw that room 214 said vacant. I mumbled what the under my breath and double-checked because I literally just checked this guy in an hour earlier. At that exact moment, unease crept sharply through me, freezing my hands mid-air. I thought maybe I made a mistake. So I looked at the check-in logs and there was nothing for him. No name, no charge, nothing. Then I went into the transaction screen to make sure his card had gone through earlier, and it showed no payments. I remember feeling completely lost and terrified inside the empty lobby, because I swore I swiped his card and it beeped like it worked, but there was nothing in the system at all. That's when I picked up the phone and called the eerily silent room 214. It rang like 10 times, but no single voice ever answered. Then I checked the keycard entry log, which tells you if the door to that room was open that night, and it showed absolutely nothing unusual recorded. No one had entered the room. That's when I realized with a cold chill, he never even went to the room after I gave him the card. I looked over into the lounge, and there he was, still sitting, perfectly motionless, staring at the TV that wasn't even on. I started to get this awful, creeping feeling deep in my chest. I sat there debating what to do. Part of me thought maybe the system just glitched, but the fact that the room had no entry log and no charge made it pretty clear he wasn't even checked in, and something was deeply dangerously wrong. I waited another 15 minutes just watching him. Around 1:30, I walked over and asked if everything was okay. He turned his head and looked at me with a disturbingly cold and emotionless stare, and he told me he just couldn't sleep. Then he turned back toward the TV. I nodded and went back behind my desk, trying to stay calm, but my hands were shaking uncontrollably. Around 2, I noticed he wasn't sitting in the lounge anymore. A sudden wave of dread washed over me. My stomach dropped right away because I didn't see him in the lobby at all. I scanned the area as quietly as possible, and then I spotted him standing at the end of the hallway, by the bathrooms half hidden in the dark. He was completely motionless and silent, just standing still. I kept glancing up at him, pretending to stay calm, while pretending to be on the computer. He stood there for a while, and then slowly walked back and sat in the lounge again like nothing happened. I called my manager at home and explained the whole strange, chilling situation that was going on. She sounded tired and told me to just keep an eye on him and call the police if he did anything threatening. I remember hanging up and thinking that it already felt threatening, like a quiet storm building inside, but I didn't know what else to do. I checked the security cameras after that. I saw him on the first floor hallway camera. He walked all the way down the hall, moving slowly with eerie precision, stopped at the end, stood there in absolute stillness for several minutes, then walked back. Later, he went into the stairwell and stayed in there for about 10 minutes. The silence during that time felt unbearably heavy. I don't know what he was doing in there, and that uncertainty still haunts me every single night. Every time I looked up from the computer, he was somewhere else near the vending machines or by the elevators. Once, just standing near the corner of the lobby where the dim light flickered eerily, he was always staring. By 3:30, I couldn't take it anymore, so I called the non-emergency police line and explained that there was a man in the hotel who seemed deliberately watching every movement. They said they'd send someone. While I was waiting in that heavy, tense silence, I noticed he moved again, this time closer to the desk. He was standing maybe 15 feet away, just watching me. His eyes were fixed cold and unblinking, like he was studying every move I made. He didn't blink much, and he definitely didn't speak. He just stared like he had a staring problem. The air felt heavier by the second. I pretended to type something on the computer, but I was so scared I could hardly breathe. At around 3:50 in the morning, the buzzer went off, and I thought maybe it was the cops already, but it was just another guest coming back late. I let him in quickly, and the man turned his head and slowly followed the guest with an unblinking stare as he walked past. I noticed his eyes follow him the whole way across the lobby. That scared me even more because it was like he was silently studying every movement, every breath of that person. A few minutes later, the man disappeared again. I checked the cameras and saw him standing outside one of the guest room doors on the first floor, completely motionless in the dim hallway light. Like he was literally just standing there, his presence sending waves of dread through the empty building. So that's when I called actual 911, my hands trembling as the phone slipped slightly, and I told him he was outside a guest's room, and I didn't know what he was trying to do. They said officers were on the way, their calm tone barely masking my growing panic. I kept my eyes completely frozen and tense on the camera feed, and he just stood at the door for about 3 long silent minutes, then slowly walked back to the lobby. When he came back, he walked right up to the desk this time and leaned over the counter. He looked at me and asked if there was any food. His voice was so low, it was deeply unsettling and unnatural. I told him there were vending machines on the corner, barely hiding my shaking voice in fear. He gave a small smile, then walked away. I just sat there staring at the clock, counting every slow second in pure fear, begging the cops to get there. Finally, around 4 to 10, 2 officers showed up. I let them in and pointed right at him. My hands were trembling uncontrollably with relief and shock. He was back in the lounge, sitting down. They walked over and talked to him for a few minutes. They asked for his ID and asked him questions I couldn't hear. Then they walked him out. One of the officers came back and explained that the guy wasn't a guest at all. The stolen credit card revealed his careful deception, and he had no bags or reservation. He had just been pretending calmly and convincingly so he could get access to the building. They charged him with trespassing and the stolen card. After they left, I sat there, completely frozen and shaking uncontrollably, until my shift was over. Every time I looked at the cameras, I expected to see him again lurking somewhere just out of sight. The part that messed me up the most was realizing he had been inside the hotel for so many eerie hours, wandering around and standing outside guest rooms in total silence, watching me from different spots. And he was never even supposed to be there. The man's eerie presence still haunts me deeply. I have no idea what his plan was, but I know it wasn't good. That was the scariest night of my life. Every second replayed in my mind for weeks. Music. My name is Meredith. I'm 24 and I work the night shift at a tiny gas station off County Road 11. It's a quiet, lonely place surrounded by endless fog. It's the kind of place most people don't even notice unless they're out of gas or completely lost. But for me, it became the start of another nightmare. I took the job because it was quiet, calm, and completely predictable. I liked that, or at least I used to. It started on a lonely, cold Thursday night around 1 a.m. The air outside was wet and still, and the hum of the overhead lights had been getting under my skin all shift. I was just about to microwave a half-stale cinnamon roll I didn't even really want when the sudden metallic door chime broke the silence. A man walked in around mid-40s with an unsettling stillness, maybe older. He had a green coat, messy hair, and dry lips, as if life had drained his warmth. He didn't head for the coffee or chips like most people. He just stood near the counter, silently absorbing every detail of the room, staring at me with a strange kind of familiarity. "Hi," I said, forcing a polite smile, my voice trembling slightly under the quiet tension. Then the man said, "You always work this late." I blinked and said, a little startled yet polite, Yeah, mostly." He smiled. Then he said in that unsettling, calm voice, "I figured, I've passed through a few times. Noticed it's always you." That simple remark suddenly sent chills and unsettled me more than I let show. "Oh yeah, right? Small town," I said. He didn't leave. Then, with unnerving familiarity, Meredith right, I froze. I wasn't wearing a name tag. I was about to ask him how he knew, but he followed it with saying that I have such distinct, careful handwriting, and he motioned to the whiteboard where I had written, "Cinnamon coffee is back." Most people dot their I's like circles. You use little slashes. It's very specific, thoughtful, and honestly unsettling in how closely he'd noticed me. I didn't respond. He didn't buy anything, just stood there for another minute watching me, like he was studying my reactions, memorizing every nervous blink and breath. Then he finally nodded. "I'm Paul," he said. "Just curious, that's all." And then he walked out into the thick, silent fog outside the gas station, leaving the air heavy with unease. After that, he started showing up randomly. Not every night. Not enough to scream stalker out loud, but often enough that I stopped assuming it was a coincidence. Each unexpected visit felt heavier, more deliberate, more wrong. Sometimes he'd come inside. Sometimes he'd just sit in his car near the edge of the lot with his headlights off. One night, I tried to ignore him. He came in, bought a bottle of water, and lingered like always. The air felt colder, charged with quiet tension. "You're quieter tonight," he said, his calm tone cutting through the silence. "Long shift," I muttered. He slowly looked around the store, like he was taking inventory of everything, his eyes tracing every corner deliberately. "It must get lonely." "Just you out here in the dark, no one else for miles," he said, his voice oddly gentle but unsettling. "I'm fine," I replied. He leaned on the counter. "You ever get scared being a woman alone at night?" The way he said it froze my blood. His voice wasn't threatening. That's what made it worse. It was curious, coldly observant, and unsettlingly calm, like he was asking about the weather. I stepped back and I asked, "Do you need anything else?" He tilted his head. "You always keep the door to the back room locked." "Smart. I've seen you do that for weeks now. I noticed you check it around 2 a.m., almost every night." My stomach turned. I didn't answer. "I'll let you get back to it," he said, with a soft, almost apologetic smile. "Didn't mean to make you uncomfortable." Then he walked out again. That moment of silence afterward felt endless. After that night, I started walking to my car with my keys between my fingers. Every dark parking lot felt like a trap waiting. I kept a tire iron under the counter. Even the smallest sound made my heart race. I changed the curtains in my apartment, started showering, with the bathroom door locked, living each night as if danger never left. There were nights he didn't come. Sometimes I'd go a whole week without seeing him, but those quiet nights felt even worse, heavier with fear. It actually made it worse, because I never knew when he'd reappear. Like the time I came back from my 10-minute break to the horrifying sight of a Polaroid left behind on the counter. It was me refilling the windshield washer bin alone in the dark silence behind the station. It was taken from that night close up, way too close. There was no note along with it, but the uneasy photo detail instantly froze my blood. The slash dot on the word "I" and the word "windshield" on the bin label had been circled in red ink. The next time he came in, I told him to leave. I told him if he stayed, I'd call the police. My shaking hands gripped the counter tightly. Paul just nodded, his voice low, disturbingly calm. "I get it. I've been too forward." "You've been following me," I said, with my voice trembling uncontrollably in fear, and I hated that it did. "I just think you're the kind of person who's used to being misunderstood." "I thought maybe you'd appreciate someone who pays attention," he said. "That's not paying attention. That's obsession," I replied. He didn't flinch. "Would it be easier if I wore a smile and brought a soda every night? Would I be more normal if I just talked about sports and pretended I didn't notice? The way your worn-out shoes are always a half size too big, or how your left eyelid twitches slightly when you're tired and anxious." "You're tired." By this point, I was already dialing 911. He didn't stop me. The police came quickly, and he didn't resist. He just stood there, completely motionless, and strangely calm arms at his sides, waiting. They searched his car and found a notepad filled with dates and times. It was my schedule notes about my walk, my clothes, my groceries. One page just had my name written again and again in frantic handwriting, over and over in tighter and tighter loops, until it turned into unreadable scribbles of obsession. He kept telling the cops the same thing. I just notice things. I'm just a curious guy, he said with that same unsettling, calm voice again. The restraining order went through that week. Now, I don't work nights anymore. I don't even live in the same town. The company transferred me to another station 2 long hours away for my safety. But even now, when I drive home and see headlights behind me for too long, I feel the back of my neck tingle with cold fear once more. And sometimes I still think about the way he said my name, slowly and with that same haunting calm, like he already knew what it would sound like in his mouth, like he'd been practicing it for hours in the dark silence. I want to start this off by saying at the time I'm writing this happened to me just last night. I work the overnight shift at a quiet, lonely 24-hour gas station, and I'm a 22-year-old woman still learning bravery, and I've been working there just shy of 2 months. I work the weekend shifts, which is Thursday through late Saturday nights, while another coworker, who I'll call Max for privacy reasons, works the weekdays of Sunday through Wednesday. My coworker Max and a friend of his, I'll call Ben, had come into the station at about 2:30 in the quiet early morning to get some coffee and say hi. Max and his friend had taken some magic mushrooms just a couple of wild hours before they came in, laughing and acting slightly off but still friendly. So when I saw them, they were all giggly and honestly full of careless late-night energy. Honestly, it was pure entertainment for me. As we were talking about random stuff, Ben had made the comments about how there was a strange and motionless car parked in the parking lot with its lights off, but running with someone inside that had been there for an unusually long time before they pulled in. He said when he questioned the guy said he was waiting for a late DoorDash delivery order. Normally, that wasn't out of the ordinary for DoorDashers to wait in their car quietly outside during late hours while we packed an order up. What was odd was I hadn't received an order in almost 2 long, tense hours. I spent most of the night in the back of the store cleaning completely alone and unaware away from the tills and the front doors, so I couldn't even see the parking lot where the mysterious car remained hidden. We waved it off as nothing, and the 2 guys went outside to smoke a cigar and play with Max's dog, who they brought along. At first I didn't think much of it, but once I was alone, I thought it was a little strange and unsettling, considering I didn't know how long they'd been out there watching the quiet lot before my coworker came in. Fast forward about an hour, and they came back in to get more coffee. It was at that point Max told me more about how the car had been out there parked ominously in the same hidden spot that even when I went to the register, I couldn't see it due to the wall. He told me that the entire hour they were out there laughing, smoking, and playing with his dog, the man in the car had switched between watching them and looking like he was texting someone repeatedly on his phone, as if sending carefully planned messages to someone unseen. When Ben had noticed this in his highly anxious and paranoid state, he walked over to the car and asked with nervous confusion, "What's up? Why are you looking at us?" At that point, the man had tried to pretend he didn't speak any English. When that didn't work, he switched to English and started saying he must have had the wrong address, before nervously speeding away from the parking lot. He was definitely higher than Max at that point. But what made it really deeply and disturbingly creepy that night was Max said that the car looked brand new and had no license plate. He also noticed there was a pile of blankets in the back thick enough to clearly hide someone underneath. And when the man was confronted, another car had just pulled into the lot with its lights off, adding a strange, chilling layer of fear. A car that also looked suspiciously brand new and strangely identical had no license plates. And as soon as the first car had started driving away, the car that had just pulled in immediately followed them out, moving in eerie synchronization under the dark sky. Max had stayed another 15 minutes before they headed out and told me to be careful and to keep an eye out. At about 6 a.m., he came back in for more coffee, and he was definitely sober, clearly more alert, and visibly worried now. So we talked more about it. He said the guy was acting super suspicious and unsettling the entire time they were out there, constantly checking his phone and watching them along with the entrance to the parking lot and the doors to the store. Even he admitted that he was truly frightened deep inside, and once he came down from his high, he wanted to check on me to make sure I was completely safe and unharmed. We both decided that if fate hadn't intervened so perfectly that night, had they not been there, this whole scenario could have gone one of several ways. I don't know if it was a pure coincidence, or if those two cars were planning on doing something to me as soon as Max and Ben had left, and I was alone. I may carry a knife on my person for protection, but my gut tells me that from what they described, that if there were multiple people, it might not have been any good. And if they hadn't been there, just innocently laughing and playing like carefree kids in the parking lot, something terrible just might have happened to me. I work again tonight under the same quiet, uneasy darkness, and I'll update if anything happens during my shift. I really wish I didn't have an update for you, but I do. The car came back again during my shift. This is how it happened. It was about 3 in the cold, haunting a.m., and I was quietly mopping the floors when 4 young men unexpectedly came in to get coffee and some snacks. I was ringing them up when one of them suddenly and curiously asked if I knew anything about the car that was at the far end of the parking lot, running with its lights off. I looked at the man and, instinctively a bit confused, asked what car. He then went on to tell me there was what looked like a brand new dark-colored Subaru with no license plates running, with what looked like 2 guys arguing intensely in the front seats. I could feel my heart suddenly drop deep into my stomach when he said this. I told the group that a car with that same creepy and suspicious description had been sitting in the parking lot the night before, but there was only one guy in it who I assumed to be the leader of this group, told me as they were pumping gas, they noticed the car as it had been there when they pulled in, and how it just sat there as they filled up their truck. He told me as they were walking to the door, as they passed the car since they were at the pump farthest from the doors. He said that as they passed, they could hear a guy not quite yelling, but talking pretty loud and pointing towards the doors of the store. As they passed, one of the guys started to walk towards the car to ask if everything was okay. When the guys in the car finally noticed them, they proceeded to put the car in reverse and drive away in a sudden, tense silence that froze the air. I told them that I believed that was the same car from the night before that had been acting suspicious when there were others in the parking lot. And when confronted, he seemed panicked before leaving quickly into the foggy darkness with another car following him out, like a shadow moving with purpose. They seemed alarmed and offered to stay with me for a bit to make sure they didn't come back. Their voices trembled slightly, showing genuine concern for my safety. I asked if they were sure, and when they told me it was no problem, they hung around for about 20 minutes before we all decided I was probably in the clear. Those 20 long minutes felt strangely comforting and unreal. I thanked them again and let them top off their coffee for free before they headed out, leaving me alone under the buzzing fluorescent lights, heart still pounding, and I was left alone. Nothing else happened the rest of my shift, but I sure as hell kept an eye out when I eventually had to go outside to change the trash at the gas pumps. What's scariest to me is that even after everything felt quiet and normal, not once did I see this car, but had multiple people warn me about it. At first I was hoping I was just paranoid, and it was really nothing. But to have the same car come back again unexpectedly 2 nights in a row at almost the same time and park in a spot that couldn't be seen from the register or the front windows makes me wonder if my paranoia is justified. If it is, I'm just glad I had another group of people arriving right at that moment, so I wasn't alone if those guys in the car had decided to come in. Thankfully, I don't work for the next few days, and I can only hope when I work again the car doesn't show up. The tension still lingered deeply inside me. My name is Daniel. I'm 29 and I work the overnight shift at a small rural motel. It's not a chain, just a family-owned place with 2 floors and maybe 25 rooms in total. The quiet isolation often felt hauntingly peaceful. I usually work from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. It's a long stretch of silence and shadows. The motel doesn't get much traffic at night. Maybe a couple check-ins after midnight if someone is traveling through, but most of the time it's dead quiet and unsettlingly peaceful. That's why I took the job. I'm not really a people person, so sitting in an empty, echoing building most nights works for me. The way it's set up is there's a main office with the front desk, some chairs, a coffee machine, and a little rack of brochures that gather dust in the silence. Behind the desk is a hallway that leads to a back office. That back office is kind of like a lounge. It has another desk, a couch, a mini fridge, and a TV mounted on the wall. The cool thing is that there's a little speaker back there that quietly echoes through the hall, giving the place a false sense of calm whenever someone rings the bell at the front desk. So normally I just sit in the back, watch something on my laptop, maybe nap on the couch, and then when I hear the bell, I get up and walk to the front. I've worked there long enough to know the regular rhythm of the place. The building creaks quietly and unpredictably. At night, the heater makes a soft clicking noise that echoes in the silence, and the front door buzzes when a guest uses their keycard after hours under the dim yellow light. Those are all normal sounds. But on nights like this, the thing about working the night shift is even the normal stuff can get under your skin if you think too much about it. Every creak, click, and hum suddenly feels alive. And sometimes the things that seem normal at first turn out not to be. That's the unsettling truth about quiet places after midnight. This happened on a Tuesday night back in fall. It was cold outside, maybe in the 42nds, and the parking lot was empty except for 4 or 5 cars belonging to guests. The silence outside made every noise inside feel louder. It was about 2 in the cold, silent a.m. when I first heard the bell. I stood up from the couch in the back and went into the main office. When I got there, nobody was standing at the desk. The lobby was empty. I looked outside through the large glass front doors, but the road was dark and seemingly empty as well. There were no cars, no headlights, no movement anywhere, only the quiet hum of the night pressing against the windows. I thought maybe I had imagined it, but the bell is loud and clear, so I knew I hadn't. I stood there for a minute in complete silence, heart pounding fast, waiting to see if anyone came in late, but no one did. So I went back to the lounge. I sat on the couch, pulled out my phone, and scrolled for a while. Not even 10 minutes later, the bell rang again. I jumped up and walked quickly into the main office, my nerves tightening with every step, but once again, it was empty. The hair on the back of my neck stood up this time. I went to the doors and stepped outside. The cold, heavy silence pressed against me, and the parking lot looked the same as before. The cars were all parked with their lights off, and there was no movement anywhere. The road was completely empty, too. I walked to the edge of the sidewalk and listened to the eerie stillness before looking both ways, but there wasn't a single sign of life out there. I went back inside and sat behind the front desk, this time instead of going to the back. I figured maybe some drunk person was messing with me. A ding-dong ditch of sorts. Maybe a guest's kid thought it was funny. But after sitting there for about 15 uneasy minutes with nothing happening, I started to relax again. I leaned back in the chair, opened my laptop, and figured it was just one of those strange, harmless nights I'd laugh about later. Then the bell rang again, a sudden sound slicing through the quiet air. I snapped my head up so fast that it hurt. The lobby was still empty, nobody in sight. My heartbeat thundered louder than the silence. My skin started to crawl. I stood up and walked around the front desk to make sure nobody was hiding, but there was no one. I checked the bathrooms of the lobby. Each door creaked open into unsettling emptiness. I even stepped outside again. Nothing. Only the cold air reminded me how utterly alone I was. I walked the lot a little, shining my phone flashlight, but it was just dead quiet and unnervingly empty. I went back inside, and that's when I decided to try something completely different and risky. Instead of going back to the lounge, I sat down in the chair right behind the front desk. If someone was sneaking around and ringing the bell just to mess with me, I wanted to be there to finally see their face and catch them. I turned the lobby lights down a little so the room was dim and filled with an eerie quietness that felt alive. It was so quiet that every little sound made me twitch. The clock ticking on the wall sounded louder than usual. The fridge in the back office clicked on and hummed. Every couple of minutes, the building creaked as it settled. I sat there with my arms crossed, trying to steady my breathing and calm my racing thoughts, staring at the bell on the counter. I jumped up so fast, I'm sure the chair almost fell over, and I bolted down the hall into the back office. I slammed the heavy wooden door shut and locked it, and I stood there in the dark, my chest pounding. My mind was racing, trying to figure out how someone could even be under there. The desk doesn't have much space underneath, but it's enough for someone to crouch if they squeezed in so quietly. That meant they'd been hiding just a few feet away from me, waiting in the silent dark like a shadow. I forced myself to look at the security monitors. There were 4 cameras, each one flickering under the cold glow. 1 on the lobby, 1 on the hallway, and 2 on the parking lot. On the lobby feed, I saw the chair had apparently tipped over in my rush. The counter looked empty and disturbingly quiet under the pale light. Then, in the bottom corner of the frame, I saw movement. A head poked out from behind the desk. I couldn't make out details, just the outline and the faint, chilling glint of eyes staring straight into the camera. I backed away from the monitor, heart racing, my breath shallow and trembling with pure fear. I couldn't look at it. I grabbed my phone and dialed 911 with shaking hands. I whispered to the dispatcher that someone dangerous had broken in and was hiding silently in the lobby. She told me to stay where I was and that officers were on the way. While I was on the phone, I watched the monitor. The person's head disappeared, and then I saw the person crawl out from behind the desk on hands and knees. He crawled to the door and then stood up. His slow, unsettling movement made my heart freeze. He was tall and wearing a hoodie with the hood pulled tight, and his posture was hunched over. In that moment, I realized true terror had a shape. The dispatcher kept asking if I was safe, but I couldn't even answer for a few seconds because my throat felt like it was closing tight with pure terror. After what felt like forever, I heard those slow, echoing footsteps moving farther away into the silence. I rushed back to the monitor. The man was pacing around the lobby again. At one point, he stood in front of the glass doors and just stared outside, motionless, as if he was waiting for someone unseen. Just seconds after that chilling moment, I heard the front doors open. When the officers cleared the building, they found a large, rough rock placed deliberately near the front door that was presumably used to prop the front door open, but they didn't find him inside. Every corner of the place felt colder than before. He was gone. They searched the lot, checked the road, and the officer told me whoever it was must have slipped out as soon as they pulled up. That thought still sends chills down my spine. I kept playing it in my head, after the way that hand just came up from under the desk and pressed the bell so disturbingly calm and deliberate. Calm as anything. Now every time I hear that bell at night, a cold shiver runs through me instantly, and I think of that night and experience. I don't think I'll ever look at that desk the same way again, because it now feels haunted by silence. Thank you for watching and supporting the channel. If you'd like to share your own story to be featured in an upcoming video, please email me at nighthorrorstoriessas@gmail.com. Every story has the power to touch someone's heart, and who knows, maybe your story will be the next one told. Send it in today, and let's share unforgettable moments together.